Let's bring you the rest of the day's stories. And MTN Ghana is confident of enhancing the cause of financial inclusion in Ghana. Head of Mobile Money Services at MTN Ghana, Elihene, made this known at the 10th anniversary launch of the Telecom's mobile money service. He justified the role of mobile money transactions as a tool to reduce cost involved in the printout of the cedi as well as its maintenance. There's more in this report.
All cash transactions must be heavily dependent on mobile money services. This is the expectation of Telecom's giant MTN as they earmark their 10th mobile money anniversary. Speaking at the launch, head of mobile money transactions, Elihene, justified the role of mobile money services as a tool of reducing costs involved in the printout of maintenance of the cedi.
We expect mobile money to be the preferred payment channel to do any financial transaction. And we believe that as we journey the government's program on trying to digitize the economy and make sure that electronic payments becomes the way of life, mobile money will be part of that journey, and will ensure that we don't spend so much money printing currency and maintaining them, but we'll use the opportunity to use mobile money as the preferred medium of payment and other electronic channels that will be available.
Joy Business engaged the CEO of MTN, Salom Adadivo, who disclosed the telecom giant is in talks with government to fast-track moves to ensure a cashless society through mobile money.
We've had very productive discussions with the government. I think if you listen to what the government says today, digital is a very critical area of development for the government. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a digital roadmap workshop led by the Ministry of Communications on this same topic. Digital is important, and ensuring that we can not only connect but also enable payments is part of establishing a digital economy. So we're very hopeful that we'll continue to see the support of the government to enable this to continue to expand.
The Payment System Statistics Report published by the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement System (GIPS) has revealed mobile money interoperability transactions hit 95.8 million Ghana cedis in value for the first quarter of 2019.
Now, a delegation from the Development Bank of South Africa has begun a business roadshow in the country to identify key infrastructure areas to finance. According to the bank, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement presents an opportunity for international businesses to partner local firms. Now, head of the delegation and group chief executive of the Development Bank of South Africa in charge of transactions, Zodwa Mbele, spoke to Joy Business at the Ghana Investment Summit 2019 organized by the South African High Commission.
The Development Bank of South Africa has promised to improve upon its development agenda in Africa, with Ghana as the gateway. The bank sees Ghana's economic growth as a boost to attract other international firms into the country. Speaking to Joy Business at the sidelines of the Ghana Investment Summit 2019, Group Chief Executive of the Development Bank of South Africa in charge of transactions, Zodwa Mbele, explains that Ghana's economic growth will need an accelerated infrastructure development, the decision to partner government.
With the economic infrastructure being in place, it catalyzes the economy further. And if you look at how Ghana is also positioned, it's a gateway for some of the West African markets. So if you develop Ghana, you'll essentially be developing just more than one country around the West African market. Yeah.
She also has been explaining how some of the areas of interest for the bank has been.
So when we talk transport has got different infrastructure within it, which is rail, it could be road, transport could be roads themselves, the construction of the roads. Ports is also part of the transport infrastructure. So we look into those that stimulate the economic development, and you need that. If you look at the ICT specifically, we talk about telecommunications. It's very key for any economy to thrive, Without telecommunication, it would be impossible to communicate and to also put, facilities that can be automated. If you look at the port can be monitored through some automative processes. You need a sound and a strong backbone of the telecommunication infrastructure.
Ghana is among the first countries to ratify the Continental Free Trade Agreement, making it a founding member of the deal. The Development Bank of South Africa also wants to use the country to develop into other parts of the continent.
The committee investigating 38 forex bureaus for regulatory breaches has submitted its report to the Bank of Ghana. The report, which examines the status of the forex bureaus, recommends sanctions against firms that failed to meet the regulatory requirements after the deadline of May 15 passed. Head of Other Financial Services Division at the Central Bank, Joseph Amoiwa, disclosed to Joy Business that they would go ahead to close down the firms when given the approval.
The problems. They were not reporting well. They were not recording transactions well. They hadn't submitted audited statements and they were overdue. Some of them were not submitting prudential returns. The record that we need to understand what they're doing to be able to police them and supervise them effectively. A good chunk of them are now,
more than half of them.
More than half are compliant, and we are hoping that by the time the decision is made, we'll have exhausted this grace, and then we'll be able to move in again to demonstrate that Bank of Ghana is serious. We are serious.
How will this decision be made?
Oh, what can I tell you? I can tell you that the work has been done. The report on those, the exceptional case have been submitted to our management. We are waiting for the approval.
Meanwhile, Barclays Bank Ghana says following the Bank of Ghana's notice to the bank concerning forex-related issues, it is engaging the regulator on the matter and will give updates on further developments. The bank says it continues to be guided by robust governance structures embedded in the organization and sound business principles in all its operations and remains highly liquid and well capitalized to support banking needs. A statement release says for over 100 years, the bank has contributed significantly to the growth of the financial sector and Ghana's economy. It says the bank will continue to partner the public for many more years to come and help bring possibilities to life. Let's turn to other news tonight. The minority in Parliament is asking Ghanaians to expect an increase in interest rates as a result of what they say is government's reckless borrowing. The minority claims government's debt stock has hit 200 billion cedis, out of which 80 billion cedis was accrued since 2017. Addressing the press, the minority spokesperson on finance, Atuforsen, said Ghanaians can expect tax increases as a result of the troubling debt situation.
Reckless borrowing and the ballooning national debt. We would like to start by saying that you can do all the propaganda about the cosmetic fiscal deficit numbers, but the public debt will show your smoothness level. The Minority Caucus in Parliament has noted the latest report on the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana and taking notice of the current national debt, which stands at almost 200 billion Ghana cedis, as at the end of the first quarter 2019. So it means in the first 27 months of President Akufo-Addo's administration, the public debt is now almost 200 billion Ghana cedis. The 200 billion Ghana cedis national debt represents an increase of about 80 billion Ghana cedis in the last 2 months and 2.5 years, not exactly 2.5 years, but about 27 months. 27 months of President Akufo-Addo's government. We draw attention to the change since 2016 for 3 reasons to the Mahama era. First, there was the promise not to borrow. Second, the MPP has benefited from a 25% bonus or increase in the GDP due to the rebasing exercise that was started obviously by the NDC administration. And then thirdly, additional oil field, Sankofa and 10, that has almost tripled output at an average of 60% price increase. At the current exchange rate levels, borrowing alone has given President Akufo-Addo a staggering $16 billion over the period. It is instructive to know that the figures does not include the 5.7 billion Ghana cedis under the Energy Sector Levies Act bond that was recently issued. Mainly, people call it energy bond. As reported by Bloomberg last week, our current public debt is the highest in 4 years and makes Ghana one of the countries with the greatest debt distress risk in the world.
Well, the majority in Parliament has been reacting to this. They say despite the criticisms on debt levels going up, GDP is also increasing, indicating the economy is growing. Let's hear from a majority member on the Finance Committee and government spokesperson on the economy, Daniel Abuaje.
When the government of MPP is borrowing, permitted by law, 2019 budget saying you can go and borrow $3 billion, dollars to finance your budget, liability management, and also to do your work, and GDP is rising. So it is important that all of us look at the relationship between production, in this case GDP, and borrowing. When you are borrowing and your GDP or your production is rising, that cannot be described as reckless. That is responsible borrowing. And you cannot just come and say anything just like that. Excuse my language, we read, we understand these things. But on the NDC, when they were borrowing, GDP was falling. There was an inverse relationship between NDC's borrowing and GDP. And that is when we were concerned that NDC was borrowing recklessly and not responsibly.
But what's the correlation between the borrowing they did and the debt you have to pay now? You are drawing a correlation between that?
Oh, of course. They may have even they claim that they did so many projects here and there, but like President Mahama said in 2008, that if development or governance is all about building roads, building hospitals, building airports and all markets, it's an exercise in mediocrity. By the way, most of the things they did, they didn't pay for it. So MPP, yes, you have to show that you are a responsible government. Don't forget, it is on record that NDC arrears accumulation rate is about 36%. MPP arrears accumulation rate is 13%, which means we have to take care of their mess and continue to manage. And also, even workers, pension, they cry onto NDC government for 7 years that no, we need our, when we go on pension, we need government. We came, 7 years NDC did not pay. We came and we paid over 6 billion. And so you just can't come and throw dust on Ghanaians and say that. I think NDC they have not made any news. If you say a country is rich in debt, unsustainable debt, measured by what? It is measured by, what do you call it, debt to GDP ratio, which is, as I speak to you, slightly over 57%. In good shape. They had it at 73.4. So they can say whatever they want to say, but the numbers can support that.
All right, let's make sense of all of this. Joining us on the phone line is economist Professor John Gachi. Thanks for your time tonight. So do you agree with the minority's claims that we've reached a point where our debt level is unsustainable?
Well, I think there are signs demonstrated over the period, and the signs are in the form of the debt burden, the repayment burden of about 18.6 billion, and that is having a toll on other activities of government, and that is reflected in further borrowing instead of generating more revenue to pay the burdensome repayment cost. So to that extent, one would say that signs of unsustainability of the debt is being shown. We need to work assiduously to increase the revenue basket to cover the repayment of the debt. And you can also see a reflection of that when you compare the commitment to repayment of debt to the commitment in infrastructure development captured under the capital expenditure of the 2019 budget. You will see clearly that we are deteriorating in terms of our commitment to capital expenditure. These are the signs you look at when you realize that your debt is becoming unsustainable. And the next thing that you look at is the revenue, the debt to revenue ratio. And the debt to revenue ratio also deteriorating. And that tells us that we are heading towards a situation that we need to look at with concern.
Okay, so in this case, we're hearing the majority saying, well, our economy is growing, GDP figures are going up, so, I mean, we don't have any cause to worry.
I think that is not the appropriate way of looking at it. GDP in general, the main benefit of GDP is how GDP is able to generate revenue for you. Our revenue generation is pegged at below 20% of GDP. Therefore, you cannot rely on that level of revenue mobilization to sustain your debt. So the GDP itself is not what you sustain, but what the GDP produces for you in terms of revenue generating, in terms of opportunity created, in terms of jobs created, for which revenue could be generated from those activities. But we are not seeing that reflected in revenue mobilization. So you cannot use that argument to back the increase in the borrowing that we have witnessed.
And so the minority claims that or is predicting that in future we are going to see interest rates go up and we are going to see tax increases as a result of the debt levels. True?
Hello?
What do you make of the minority's claims there?
Yeah, I didn't get what you said.
So the minority is predicting that interest rates are going to go up and tax levels or taxes are going to be increased as a result of the current debt levels. Do you agree?
Well, when your debt level is becoming unsustainable, the pressure is on you to mobilize more revenue. Already we have indicated that there is a possibility of going into the mobile money sector to see if there will be introduction of some taxes to raise more revenue. So that would not be surprising if more actions taken to bring more revenue through some other activities. So that is not surprising. It's only a reaction to the fact that we are becoming very some sense of low revenue generation and high interest costs.
So my last question to you, it appears that we have a debt crisis. How do we fix this?
Well, I think that is the job that the government ought to do, because the government is not accepting that the huge borrowing is a problem for the country in the face of low investment in capital activity or investment in infrastructure. So I think government should come out with an innovative way of dealing with the matter. The matter is becoming precarious. I think we need to be sober and reflect on it and come out with an innovative approach to deal with the situation.
All right, thanks very much indeed. Professor John Gachi is an economist there sharing his perspective on the minority's press conference. So the minority raising concerns about the rising debt levels. Of course, we don't expect them to agree on everything, I mean the minority and the majority, but one thing they do agree on is that the debt levels are very high. So joining me in studio is parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gakpo. What were the recommendations that were made by the minority there?
So their point is simple, that before the NPP took over power, they had insisted that they can raise money locally to finance their development projects. And so they're expecting them to live according to that and raise money locally instead of going for loans in order to finance various activities. The second thing they are insisting on is that the money that is being borrowed should not be spent on consumption, and it should be spent on infrastructural projects that they can help recoup that said investment that has been made into them as the sure way around it. But they still think, even in the light of that, the increasing debt situation is very worrying. And in fact, the minority, they are predicting that next year by this time, the debt level will reach 250 billion Ghana cedis, and they give a number of indications that's why they think it's so. They say there are a number of outstanding loans that they didn't even add to their current calculation. They said there's a 750 million Ghana cedi loan for commercial infrastructure projects that's outstanding. There's a loan that GNPC has taken to the tune of $200 million. There is $1.5 billion that's been taken for Get Fund, all of which would eventually add up to that and take the figure that high.
So are these recommendations that the majority would consider? What are they saying about these recommendations?
So they keep going back to a point they indicate the finance minister has made, that once your economy has the capacity to pay back the loans you are taking, then you are not in a distressed situation. So they think the maximum limit hasn't been reached yet, particularly because they say that GDP is rising even as the debt levels are rising. So debt to GDP ratio is relatively lower than during the NDC regime. And so they are not buying into these suggestions, but they insist they would manage the economy prudently and ensure that it doesn't run into any distress.
All right, thanks very much. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo bringing us the latest there. From Parliament, of course, we will be looking at what happens in the future. That's in 2020, where the minority is predicting that our debt levels will reach 250 billion cities. That's it for Business Live tonight. Thanks for watching. We've got more news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for watching once again. We'll be back same time tomorrow.